Hi, everybody. So my name is Ronnie Falcon, and I'm a product manager at OpenMined. In today's presentation, I'm going to focus on the economies and the governance space, and hopefully give you a sense of why we think these are really important institutions for OpenMined to focus on, and share how we're thinking about changing the flow of information to create more incentive for those institutions to provide great outputs for us. Now, if you're going to fall asleep at any point of this presentation, here is your main takeaway. By giving people more ownership and control over their personal data, we can start monitoring the effect of different products and services on our lives and start holding institutions more accountable to provide great services. And now you can fall asleep. And I will start with focusing on economies, and then we'll get into governance a little bit later. But before that, a quick recap on our mission at OpenMined. So as Andrew mentioned, we want to align and incentivize all institutions to only serve the best interest of humanity. Now, we plan to do that by building infrastructure that changes the flow of information so that it enforces alignment and create novel incentives. And when we're thinking about institutions that have huge impact on people, as Andrew mentioned earlier today, businesses and corporations really come to mind. And really, the interaction that we have with those businesses and corporations defines so many parts of our lives, right? This interaction will basically determine like what products I have at the end of the day, how much it's going to cost me to have those products, and also how much money I'm going to have left in the bank after buying those products and services. It determines what problems in my life are going to be solved, right? And it also determines the quality of those solutions. So generally, we can say that it also determines the quality of my life. So really big and important space generally in people's life, and hence this focus on economies. And the question here, again, is where in the economy space we don't see alignment, where it's not fully met. Now, there are many cases where alignment is definitely fully met, right? When I order in food, I call a restaurant and food shows up at my doorstep. This is alignment. My expectations are definitely being made, right? So we're not here to say that alignment is not fully met everywhere in the economy space. But I'd like to propose two big areas where we're still struggling and alignment is still not great. First of all, it's really hard for me to know if I'm getting the best products and services out there, right? So more than ever, especially with the rise of recommendation systems and targeted advertisements, it's really easy for me to find products and services to buy, right? I can like click one button on Amazon and get the product delivered. But it's really hard for me to know if those products and services are the best ones out there for that price range, right? And if we're thinking about it, companies are not really incentivized at this moment to make sure that they're providing that best product and service, or that they're really delivering on their promise of the quality of that product. And the reason is that they're really focused on the input, on me basically purchasing that product. And my experience after that purchase is almost secondary, right? Because the purchase has already been made. So again, if we can find ways to incentivize companies to focus more on that output, we're winning. We're creating more alignment in the economy space. Now, second misalignment, and that's a really interesting and important one, is that it's really hard for me to understand what is the effect of a specific product or service on my life, right? And that one is really dear to me. We see that all over in the digital space, where we as people are really left with the task of understanding the trade-offs between what is the value that a product provides in my life and what is the actual side effects of it, or what are the negative parts of consuming this product. And let me give examples because it will make it clearer. For example, I know that I really enjoy using my newsfeed and keeping up with my friends, right? But really understanding what's the effect of me using this newsfeed on my mental health, right, is a task that is impossible for me to answer. It's also hard for me to know if by using this newsfeed, I manage to really strengthen my relationships with my friends, which is kind of my goal from the first place, right? Similarly, I can say that I really enjoy the recommendation systems that are the recommendations of videos that are shown to me on my video streaming product, right? But it's really hard for me to know what's the impact of binge watching now, like a horror series until 2 a.m. What's that impact on my sleep? And obviously, I used a very extreme example, but like overall, I would love to know what's the impact of me binge watching or just watching videos on my sleep, on my mental health, on my weight, my fitness. I think a really hard task that we're tasked to do right now as people interacting with products and services is to really understand what is the trade-offs between overexposing my data, giving my data about like my past video consumptions in order to get a recommendation. What is the trade-off between giving my data and also getting a product and service in return? And I'm really tasked to make that decision right now. And it's really hard for me to get that holistic understanding of of the effects of products and services in our lives and really make a real smart decision. So again, solving this type of alignment, and hopefully I'll show soon how we can do that, will really benefit us and force businesses and corporations to really focus on putting us in the center of those of what they care about. So categorically speaking, right, I think that to summarize like the two misalignments that I mentioned, we can think about it in the way that companies are more incentivized right now to focus on inputs, right? It could be like making sure that they build a news feed that I'm really engaged with, rather than on meaningful outputs, which is, in this case, making sure that I am strengthening and creating great relationships with my friends. So the million-dollar question is how we can change the flow of information to help create better alignment, right? And here is a provocation, and hear me out here. What if people had full ownership and control over their personal data? Now, in this world, we're basically creating a space where people are the ones that are holding the copy of the data that is being generated about them from different products and services. So for instance, my videos, my past videos, the videos that I watched, as well as the videos that I haven't watched, are all owned and controlled by me. Let's say stored on my wallet or my personal data bank account, right? Institutions have access, well, federated and very controlled access to that data. Again, not reading the records, but being able to use this data in order to provide value back to me. Well, in that model, right, we basically start owning the impact of the data that shows the impact of a specific product or service on my life, right? And that is because now I can start like seeing, okay, I can start asking questions like what types of, how many videos I'm watching, how long I've been watching, and I have the access to all of that data. So it's accessible for me. Now it becomes really interesting when we are starting to store information from various different services, all more or less at the same place, right? So now I can start saving my video watches and my watch history on my wallet, but I can also store information about like my sleep patterns from my sleeping device, right? And now I can start answering really interesting questions like, what is the effect of watching a specific video on my sleep, right? Now, so basically summarizing, if we are going to give people full ownership, more or less full ownership and control over their personal data that is being generated by companies, we're going to be able to incentivize more alignment for the following reasons. One, again, we're going to have access to an holistic understanding of the effect of a specific product or service on my life. And now I can start holding companies accountable for the value that those products and services have or create in my life. I also start getting better control over unintended side effects, right? First, because I can start measuring those unintended side effects. Again, for example, I can start measuring that there is a correlation between my use of newsfeed and negative impact on my mental health, right? So I can start measure it from one side, and also I can basically disable access to products and services that might have negative, might contribute to that side effect. And finally, and perhaps the most interesting point here, we can incentivize more new and exciting forms of services, right? Because now products or service providers don't only have access to one type of data. For example, only access to the videos that I watched in my streaming service, right? But instead, they have access to wider data. And by access, I again mean federated, controlled, not access to all the records, but they have more ability to give me better solutions, because now they can start recommending products that actually do better, that contribute better to my life. Recommending, for instance, videos that will contribute to my sleeping, being better. Now, the last point is that we can start incentivizing outcome-based payment models. So that's kind of like the extreme end of all of this, but you can imagine a world where I'm no longer paying only for the input, just like paying my video streaming service just because I'm using it, but instead I'm paying it only if it helps me achieve a specific goal that I care about, like achieving a good night's sleep. Let me give you a better example. What if we only paid the mattress company if there is real evidence that my sleep has been improved since using this mattress, right? That will be amazing. Now, I'm using a lot of sleep examples, and that is because personally I care a lot about it, but you can imagine how this really affects all sorts of parts of our lives, from diet, for exercise, to friendships, mental health, political views. Anything that we really value and care about could be now monitored better, and we can really trust that we're consuming products and services that help us achieve our goals in those domains. So we're basically in this like long-term and exciting world creating what we coined as welfare economy, right? And again, personal data is stored and owned by us, the users. Institutions or service providers, on one hand, help contribute and generate more personal data by us using those services, and on the other hand, have federated and controlled and privacy preserving access to that data in order for them to provide a product and service back for us. And in the best case, now we can start monitoring and understanding what's the impact of those services in our life, such that if a goal is met, those products and services could start being rewarded. They can get paid for it. That's a really, really novel kind of a long-term way of thinking about how the economy could look like. So in this diagram, it's obviously an oversimplification of this space, but in the orange, you can see that we're basically envisioning that people will have their personal data wallets, or better think about it as a personal data bank account, because obviously it has to have all the attributes or the features that bank account has in terms of like protection of those assets, this data. There is some sort of an interface that allows users to manage their data and grant access to different apps. In green, we can see all the apps that have some sort of an interaction with that data storage. And in pink, we can see that there is one sort of like goal monitoring system that can basically see how much I'm improving or not improving on different measures that are important for me in my life. And finally, a payment system that can monitor those goals and send money and or pay services that are basically contributing for me achieving the goals. So I want to take a step back and really answer a question of like how all of this is related to data privacy and to OpenMined. Now, Andrew talked a lot about this in his presentation, so I really think that you should watch that if you haven't watched it already. But I want to take the time to kind of reiterate on that because I think that it's a really important point for us to discuss and something that is not obvious to anyone, right? So again, I hope that the link to kind of PyGrid and PySift is a little bit more intuitive, because in this world that I'm painting, where data is being owned and controlled mainly by us, we need to grant some sort of a distributed and federated access to that data storage, right? So that's why technologies that allow us to access the data in a privacy-preserving way, but also technology that allows us to make really good computation on top of this, so machine learning or other types of data analysis on top of it, so that the services can really, provide value back to us in the form, for instance, of a recommendation system or whatnot, are core for all of this. So we need that type of technology, and that's the main link to kind of PyGrid and PySift. But I also want to talk a lot again about what is the relationship to data privacy. So in our presentations today, Andrew and Nick and I are all talking about aligning incentives instead of focusing on data privacy, like we as a open source community have been like focused more on in the past. And the reason why we're focusing on aligning incentive is because data privacy, in its traditional kind of sense of data ownership and control, is really a tool for us, if we think about it, to prevent misuse of our data, right? So prevent using our data in harmful ways. But again, our goal is not only to prevent a harmful use of our data, but instead we really want to let people or let institutions use this data in ways that are really positive for us, right? So accelerate positive and impactful use of that data. So our data should be, serving us, the users, the owners of the data, right? And by changing the flow of how data is being owned and controlled, we can incentivize institutions to not only not harm us, but instead also give us better services. So I hope that makes it a little bit clearer now. So if you're bought to this vision, and if you're getting excited, you'll know it if you're like sitting on the edge of your seat right now. You might be asking like, okay, how are we going to get there? This is a great new world that you're painting, but like, how do we do this, right, as a community? And really, we want to propose a 3-stage strategy. And obviously, it's a very oversimplified version of it, but I think it will give us a good sense of how we've been thinking about starting to conquer this space. So first, we want to prove the concept. So we want to show that we can create an end-to-end encrypted privacy-preserving app. And we decided to focus on a meeting scheduler in this space for this purpose. I'll get into this in a bit. Sorry. So with that MVP, the minimum viable product, we can really demonstrate that we managed to, create this personal data storage. There is some management app that grants access and control over that data. And also there is one app that uses that data in a federated privacy preserving way, right? The second goal will be to generalize. Now we're basically in the business of building infrastructure that can really support the needs of many app developers. So no longer really building just for that first product, like making sure that we have all the tools that are needed for that first MVP, but instead generalize it and incorporate as many needs of app developers. the third goal is to really scale, right? And here it's the business of finding ways to onboard as many apps into this ecosystem. Now, we think that if we manage to onboard as many apps as possible into this ecosystem, we're creating a really, really great incentives for new types of welfare economy apps, right? So output-based apps. Because now there is this data storage that every person have about themselves that includes data from so many different aspects of my life. Again, like my video consumption, my interactions with friends, my sleep patterns. And now we can see, we would definitely see new types of services that are built on top of them that are optimizing for the goals that we as people care about, right? So that's basically the plan in terms of how to get to this world of welfare economy. So I want to dig a little bit deeper into the MVP, the minimum viable product. And again, our goal here is to really prove the concept, show that we can create like, personal data storage that is controlled and also letting a service like a meeting scheduler in this case use that data in order to provide some value for us. And we picked for this MVP a meeting scheduler. So in a nutshell, the idea is that when I'm about to schedule a meeting with a coworker or a friend, that is usually the problem is like when I'm trying to do that with someone from another organization, it's really challenging for me, right? Because I don't know, think about all the times that you went back and forth over email to schedule those meetings, right? Today, this flow is quite difficult. So the idea is that I would be able to share a URL with that coworker, and basically that URL grant access to my data, to the calendar, to my events, right, on my calendar, which are stored locally on my data wallet. And the app would be able to access both of us, so it will be able to access both of us data from two different wallets and find all the time slots that are basically available for us to meet, right? So it does this private set intersection on top of our personal calendars. Now, again, data is not being revealed about my calendar or about, not even when I'm available. It will only surface the times that both of us are available. Now, we think that this is a really cool MVP for a few reasons. One, it really solves a big pain point. So we think that especially in this community where we all come from different organizations, it's really difficult for us to kind of find times that are suitable for us, right? And we hope that as we launch and try to test this feature, you'll all use it and help us test it, right? The second point for this MVP is that it really has no real competition. And obviously, there are many similar apps that, if you use Calendly or other that allow you to like help you automate the scheduling process a little better. But all of those apps really require full access to your calendar information, right? And for corporate users, for instance, people who work for big companies, this is not it's a no starter, right? Because those corporations don't really want these applications to own their calendar information. It can reveal really important business critical data. So that's the second reason. And third, I think that's really the most important one, is that it actually has a really beautiful viral effect. So just by people trying to schedule meetings, they will share a link to the application to their coworkers, and coworkers will learn about it and hopefully download the app and also start using it. So we think that there is a big potential here for real scale. And again, the goal here is to really demonstrate that end-to-end, privacy preserving, end-to-end encrypted app that is the basis for other apps to be developed on top of it. And I think that this application here is one that can really help us demonstrate that, because it needs the same components that many other apps will need in the future. Okay, and with that, I will take a break from economy and shift gears into governance. So obviously a big institution that affects all of our lives is the governance space, right? Governments. And I don't think that I need to talk too much about what role governments have on our lives, on democracy, on all of that. So the main question for us here is, okay, what misalignments exist in the governance space, and how do we incentivize them to align with us? And really, how do we incentivize governments to focus more on the outputs that they provide, being like great policy, and less on the input, being like getting my vote, right? And we do think that generally changes in the flow of information and really like making people own more of the data, more of the control over what is the effect of different policies and different decisions on our lives will eventually force or incentivize governments and as well as other institutions to align to provide better services to us, right? Now, this is a really, really big space, governance, and I think that for us, we obviously want to see like great change in that domain, but we decided to focus on a space that we think that we can really impact in the short term, and hopefully that space would then help us generalize and kind of conquer more goals in the governance space in general. And that space is the polling industry. So why do we decided to focus on polling? The main reason is that polling has a really big impact on our lives. It really has a big impact on the way that policy is being decided, right? So we know that the results of polls affect policy. It also affects a lot the messaging that politicians provide to us. And very importantly, it also has a huge impact on the way that we decide to vote at the end of the day. And there is some research that shows that the way that polls, the output of polls really affect people's votes at the end of the day. So what are the misalignments in this space, right? So first of all, polls are not always representative, and that has to do with the way that polls are being conducted. There's a lot of field work, a lot of phone calls, right? So it's really hard for the pollsters to create a really representative set. It's prone to people not really providing the right attributes about themselves, and it's really a question of how wide of a reach those polling systems have in the population. There are some differences in between different communities about the rate in which they are willing to answer polls and answer polls reliably, right? So it's not always representative. The second thing is that it's subject to the way that the pollster, the person that designs the poll, asks the question. And it's also subject to the way that they publish the results, right? They can control like at what point in time they publish the results, what results they're showing. So they can be really strategic about that. And we see like the discrepancy between two different polls at a single day as an evidence for that, right? Some day we can see completely different results for more or less the same question. The third thing is that in many cases, people really struggle to answer questions on subject matters that they're not experts on, right? So there's no way for them to say, hey, delegate my vote to someone that I trust, being a friend or an expert or someone else, right? So there are some, quality issues in the results of those polls. So let's talk about the flip side of it. What does like aligning incentives in the polling industry, so to speak, looks like? So first of all, it's representative, right? So we have a way to verify that the results are representative and really capture many voices in the society. The second thing is that people should be able to ask and choose their own questions. And here I'm talking about two things. One, people should be able to also decide what questions should be asked, right? So not only politicians or pollsters should be determining the questions, but we should also vote on the questions that are important for us, right? The second thing is that we should have more control on the way that questions are being presented. The third thing is that complex issues should be delegatable, right? So I should be able to delegate my vote to someone that I trust, being an expert or a friend. The fourth thing is that obviously the identity need to be kept in all of this in all of this system. Obviously, it should broadcast that I made one vote and one vote only, and I'm a voter, but nothing else about myself should be revealed. So, in simple terms, we really want to build a polling system as our MVP, our minimum viable product, and it really has two components there. One is the identity app, which is an app that manages to verify certain attributes about myself in a reliable way. So through that app, I should be able to say, to confirm my age, my city, my employer. And again, this is some sort of a personal information app. Maybe it sits on a wallet, but on my personal wallet. But that application basically has the responsibility of verifying the quality of verifying attributes about myself in high quality, right? That app should be able to surface different attributes about my life without revealing anything unnecessary. So for example, I should be able to verify with different applications, in this case, the polling system, my age, that I'm over 18. But it should not verify my entire information about my driving license, or that it doesn't have to even reveal what is my age. It should only verify that I'm over 18 and I'm eligible to vote for this case in this poll, right? The second component is really a polling app. And again, this is part of what we were planning for the MVP. And then the goal there is to create an end-to-end encrypted and privacy-preserving polling app that anonymously obviously proves that I'm a member of a certain group, being like over 18 or unemployed in a certain organization, verify my city, etc. It should allow people to select the questions that they want to vote on and to assign a vote on a specific topic, right? And over time, me as part of a specific group would be able to review the votes on that for those questions, right? Now, the cool part is that we have done a lot of progress already in the OpenMined community on all of these, on a lot of those technologies. So tomorrow, I think it's at 3 p.m., we just verify 3 p.m. Eastern, we have a demonstration session for the Opus and the PriVote team that really talks about the identity app and then also the voting system that I'm describing here. And please show up. I think what will be really exciting is that they will also demonstrate how you can already prove that you're a member of the OpenMined community, and you'll be able to prove that you've attended this conference and store that locally on your personal wallet. So please show up. This will be really an exciting demonstration. So a lot of progress on this space. Hopefully the link to governance is a little clearer. Hopefully you'll be active in using our polls once it's ready for testing. And with that, I would like to thank you and end this presentation. If you are interested in these domains, the governance, the economies, but also in the research space, we are excited to help us start building concrete applications that can get us and get big institutions to think a bit more critically about the products and services that they're providing us. Please reach out. We're looking for so many people. We're looking for engineers, UX designers, researchers. We're looking for program managers. But really, if you're excited about this space, reach out. I'm sure we can, find a place for you to help us out. And yes, and also feel free to reach out to me at Ronnie@openmind.org with anything, with any thought or question. We're really passionate about this space, and we want to start a conversation and a community that is more engaged in this conversation. So please reach out to us with any thought on this space. Thank you again.